Hi everyone. So I'm on campus today, and I thought rather impromptu. I have been planning to do a bit of an update on why I developed the intent framework and my whole philosophy behind it. And I thought, you know what? Since I'm on campus, and um, Roehampton, which is where all of my ideas really came together. Seeing as I'm here, this is probably the perfect place to do it. I hadn't planned to record anything, so I haven't literally got anything on my face. But hey, I'm trying to change the world, not be Insta famous. So the reason why I'm doing the intent framework is because as parents, or just people in general, I'm sure you've gone down a rabbit hole of information and hit a wall when you research something specific pertaining to your child or children that you know and care about. And essentially what I want is for people to have the tools that they need to support their children and get the best possible solution within their reach. So whatever context that your life is in, whatever situation that you are in, there are things that you can be doing to circumvent some of the issues that exist in the education system, that exist in society in general, to kind of shield your child from that. At the end of the day, I am aware that many parents feel like they need to do something and they don't really know how to support the child, so they hop from person to person to get answers. I believe that if we helped parents to come to the answer on their own, they would know what to do, or at the very least have a better idea in how to come by that information. So for example, understanding different observation methods will allow you to take a bank of evidence to professionals who are themselves constrained and push the limit. So for example, if you go to your GP and your child has is presenting some symptoms, and your GP will say things like, how long has this been going along, and blah, blah, blah. We live in a world now where, and I'm talking from a British context because that's where I am at the moment. Anyway, I'm moving to Ghana soon, but that's neither here nor there. But these issues actually apply across the world, and that's down to colonial kind of histories, but also because of globalization, which is effectively trying to make everybody be educated in the same way, which is problematic in itself. But anyway, the point I'm making is GPs, for example, if you get a GP appointment, you're constrained to a 15-20 minute appointment, and your GP is not really necessarily able to give you the assessment or the time that you need for your child. So you might be like, yeah, these are the things that I've observed about my child, and I need support, and you might not even get the support that you need because there isn't really enough evidence even, and the GPs don't have time to collect that evidence to then refer you on. So for example, if you then get referred on to a speech and language therapist or anybody else, you might get an hour assessment and they brand your child based on that 1 hour assessment. If, for example, as a parent, you know how to carry out observations on your own, you can take this bank of evidence to your appointment, and your child will get support that's more tailored to where they actually are and what they actually need, if that makes sense. Anyway, so I'm going to go back to my script now as I get up to, I've spoken to GPs who are equally fed up and tried their best to support patients, but effectively, as I said, if you came to them with the concrete information, they can help your child quicker. And observation is one of the things that the framework hinges on. Observations, especially parent observations and practitioner observation, I believe is the best thing and the most useful form of data. We all know that our data is effectively being harvested in lots of different ways. But you can take control of that data and use it to actually support your child. I remember when I was in practice, early years practitioners who tend to spend a lot of time with children, their voices are not even necessarily acknowledged when it comes to getting some sort of support for your child. So I've been in situations where parents have gone to a speech and language therapist, for example, for support, and rather than listening to what the practitioners, myself, my team, have observed over the past 6, 7, 8 months and have evidence for, they will kind of turn around and say, well, you don't know anything because you're just a nursery nurse, for example. And they don't take that information seriously. And that is to do with how early childhood in general is positioned in society. All of these things lead to problems where brilliant children end up being medicated, and parents are so anxious that there's something wrong with their child when they're just responding quite naturally to some of the toxic environments that the world has created for children. We expect 2-year-olds to be able to sit still and concentrate and do all of these things that's not within That's not what they're supposed to be able to do. So what happens is, some parents watch all of these videos and come across all of these things about, your child should be reading it, child can be reading it too, and so on and so forth, and think there's something wrong with their child when they're behaving as a normal 2-year-old, begin to think, maybe my child has ADHD, begin to project that onto their child. But that's because we are taking away children's play opportunities, and children are effectively responding and reacting to that. We have all of these expectations of how children should reach this particular milestone at this particular age, otherwise there's something wrong with them. An example that I always give is Einstein didn't speak until he was 7. Now imagine Einstein growing up in today's society. He would have been medicated beyond belief, and probably wouldn't have produced all the things that he produced. So as I said, I'm on campus. I love Roehampton. The team here are phenomenal. They are so deeply involved in advocating for change and really motivated me. So my degree really kind of changed the trajectory of my career. When I was in second year, I did a module called Professionalism and Advocacy, which really changed my life. It opened my eyes to the fact that the frustrations that I had felt all my life from a child, experiencing education, right down to my observations in practice, were not all in my head. And a bunch of people have been trying to fix it and have the solutions that would turn around the world in about 10 years. But like I said, in the actual framework video, those who have the power to change it just don't care. So for me, I think it's important that people understand the ways in which they can make changes in their own life to circumvent some of this. The reason why I put the framework together is that it's underpinned by theory. Theory in line with the idea of praxis, which Freire talks about. Freire is one of the key thinkers that I am deeply motivated by. And he talks about the importance of praxis, and in order to make real change, you need equal parts reflection and action. And reflection is that theory, understand why things are the way that they are, and then you can make a plan to kind of make that change. His ideas were hella revolutionary. He ended up being imprisoned, extradited, and his book's been banned all over the country. Specifically in early years, I base a lot of my early years practice on Froebel. And it's actually why I decided to record the video whilst I'm on campus, because we are based in Froebel College. If maybe I'll do another video about that, but I have a long history of, I think it was the first teacher training college in England. Has a very, very long history of revolutionizing education. But Froebel also, his ideas were so revolutionary that his kindergartens were banned in Germany at the time, because they were seen to be basically making people misbehave. Both of these authors really drive this whole critical thinking, and Froebel's whole ideas is based on allowing children to think freely, so that they can basically be free thinkers. Lots of people, especially on social media, I've noticed that lots of people like Montessori, and I'm not trying to be critical because I don't want the Montessori crew to come for me, but Montessori, I find her quite limiting. There's a lot of focus on the fact that she teaches independence and all this kind of stuff, but those things are not her invention. Froebel had already proposed that many, many years ago. So people think, for example, that, having child-sized furniture is Montessori's idea, but again, Froebel had proposed that way before. What makes her ideas unique is the fact that she has a lot of self-correcting resources. But her self-correcting toys effectively are based on the idea that there's only one way to do it. And some Montessori settings now have evolved those ideas and tried to expand them a little bit, but Montessori herself spoke out against that. And she was quite critical of people, even during her life, that tried to adapt her philosophies and her theories and stuff. She very much is not about people colouring outside the line. I think people like Montessori because it very much gets children to quote unquote behave very quickly. So lots of people say things like, I like Montessori because the children are so well behaved in school. 2-year-olds are not meant to be well behaved. 2-year-olds are not meant to sit quietly for long periods of time. And I find that whole narrative actually quite damaging. The point I'm making is that the whole education system is based on producing a bunch of people who lack critical thinking. And those who do not fit into that form of thinking begin to believe that there's something wrong with them. During the pandemic, we did a lot of online teaching. And during one of my lectures, one of my students' children actually joined in and said that that's exactly how he feels at school. He feels like he's restricted. He feels that he can't really express himself. And that's basically what the system does. It tries to prepare children to regurgitate information rather than actually learn skills that apply in real life and helps them to transform their own life. The main driving force behind this is assessment. We over-assess children. There's way too many exams. Lots of people feel like if your children are passing exams, then they're doing something well. And this problem is now being scaffolded, I guess, is being put into the early years, which is something that, again, we are actively resisting. So now you have the 2.5-year check. So any parent whose child is 2 or 3 would have recently or is about to receive a 2-year check, probably in the mail, where you complete this checklist. And I did a checklist with a parent recently, and honestly, I was genuinely disgusted by the content of this checklist. But essentially, the whole point of the checklist is to check if children are on track for development. And what happens in the 2.5-year check is if your child is not seen to be developing on track, what actually happens is their play opportunities end up being limited because there's almost a push to get those children to be ready for school at 3, 4, and 5. And what they need is that play. They need that play, and it just becomes a self-fulfilling problem. This issue with over-assessment is actually so problematic that it's becoming a problem even at university. So one of the key issues that I have found teaching undergraduate students, what happens is students arrive, and because they're so used to this restrictive regurgitating form of education, when you say to them that we present all of this information and we say, okay, what do you think? They think what we want is for them to regurgitate that information back to us. And so when people don't do well at university, it's not because they're not smart, they're not clever, and so on and so forth. When I try to say to students, analyze, critique, all of these things, they say, oh, I don't know how to do that, blah, blah, blah. But you do, because you analyze and you critique every single day, all of your life. Okay, I give students some very wild examples. I'm not going to do that here. But the point I'm making is I really hope you kind of get my point, is that this problem is a really, really big problem. And now that they're putting it on young children in nurseries, it's becoming an even bigger problem. And what's happening is we effectively want, not we, as in the powers that be, effectively want children to comply and be quite linear thinking as quickly as possible. And that's effectively why I developed the intent framework. The intent framework is based on helping parents navigate that, because it's really difficult to live outside of the system. It's really difficult to say you're not going to send a child to school. Lots of people don't necessarily have the knowledge and skills to teach their child in that formal way. But there's lots of different ways in which you can actually support your individual child, especially in the early years. And that's why it focuses on the early years. So lots of people have asked me why I don't open my nursery again. And the reason for that is that I found that I can't really provide the care in the way that I would want to, without charging an obscene amount of money, and the parents who really need it wouldn't really be able to afford it. Parents who already can afford it already send their children to those nurseries. So for me, in true Frere spirit and in true Froebel spirit, I set up the intent framework. And the intent framework is actually the first step in a research center that I'm going to build that is dedicated to effectively researching practical solutions to problems that we face in the world, and then disseminating that to people who need it. So a lot of the problem is in research is like all of the research, all the information, all the ideas, the recommendations stay in the academic bubble, and people who need it then don't have access to it. So I'm just going to break down how the Intent Parenting Program works. It consists of a 12-week program, and if you sign up, you just need one subscription, and both parents can attend the course for the duration of the 12 weeks. And you can figure that out however works within your family structure. So as I said, it runs on a 12-week rotation, and every few weeks the course opens up again for a new cohort. But within your cohort, you stay with the same cohort that you start with. Each week, there's a 2-hour fully interactive online teaching session, which will come with all the resources that you need. We go through the framework, identify, neutralize, theorize, execute, negotiate, and transform. So identify is where you identify your current parenting philosophy, what you personally want to get out of the program, and how you want your child's life to be transformed effectively. Neutralize is the reset phase where you clear space for new ideas. I introduce you to a bunch of new theories and philosophies, and you decide which ones you wish to adopt based on your own values and goals. So the framework, although you're part of the cohort, you actually apply it differently to your own life and your own life circumstances, and that's the whole point. So after you've done the neutralize stage, we go on to theorize, where you learn different observation methods and how to use them to support your child. Execute is where you use those observation methods to observe a child, make specific plans based on the observation results, and begin to implement those. Negotiate is where you apply those plans more broadly and begin to include other people that you need, so educators, carers, other family members. What this does is transfers the power back into your hands. So if you're interacting with educators, you're not going as the least knowledgeable person in the conversation. You're actually going with your own intention, and you're just kind of saying, this is what I want my child. This is how I want my child to experience your classroom. And then transform is how you apply that moving forward. So by the end of the 12 weeks, you'd have completed a strategy for supporting your child for literally the rest of their life. Once the 12 weeks are over, you graduate, and you are free to remain friends with the people in your cohort and join a wider cohort with a whole bunch of other benefits, discounts, events, and so on that will be happening in the future. I will be starting with the first cohort in July. It will run on Thursday evenings from 7 to 9 p.m. I'm doing an introductory offer of 50% off, which works out to be £997. You can pay this off as a one-off payment and get a further discount of around about £100, or you can pay in 3 or 6 month installments. If you are interested, if you haven't already watched the actual intent framework explanation video, please go and watch that on the website. Also, book a call if you would like to discuss, if you have any questions, or book a space. If you have any questions, you can drop me an email, you can send me a DM on Instagram or Twitter, probably Instagram because I use that more. I hope you have found this video informative and enjoyable. Thank you very much for watching this video. Please comment, like, and subscribe. And remember to be intentional with your parenting, because everybody else is intentional with your child.